Good day guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the last video I'm making about the Talaria and Enduro. I decided this is time to make a statement on whether, or I guess on my feedback on this whole setup and adventure with my Talaria. So first I'm going to start by saying again that I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional, I'm just a rider that's just coming back to the sport recently after being injured, and also is just genuinely curious and excited about electric motorcycles. So today I took my Talaria for the first time in a real enduro test. I wouldn't say it's an extremely hard enduro ride that I did. I wouldn't say it's an easy one either. I just think that it's a good enough test for my 1821 setup with milk racing wheels. And that gives me a good idea of what actually I'm going to do moving forward with this bike. So this is my honest feedback and I hope it helps everyone. I bought those wheels originally on a Segway and then changed halfway through for a Talaria, so I wanted to make these wheels fit because the different hubs, which I managed to do so. Then when I looked for a tire, I couldn't find anything in the shops here locally except for a 140 8018 Michelin. I thought that I'd put myself a challenge and see if I could make it fit, and then in my mind that was the perfect setup, you know, to go enduro in tropical humid climate with a lot of, you know, mud, clay, sand, watery, deep creek riding like I used to on my petrol bike before. And I thought that would be my a great retirement bike to do just that well, quietly, and with a lot of fun. So my feedback is the following: this bike, in my opinion, is not made for enduro riding. And when I say enduro riding, I really mean just that type of terrain. And if you add on top of that rock faces, rock climbing, very steep descents. So let me explain why. First of all, there's definitely a lot more grip with these tires and these size tires on the motorcycle like this, but this is a bike that hasn't been made for that. The frame is much lighter. The components are from mountain bikes, which are light, but not necessarily built to last or built to endure hard punishment terrain usage. So even though today my Talaria came back and it looks like everything is in one piece, it's only 30 kilometers, and if you do that every weekend, I pretty much am guaranteed that something will break on this bike. So that's my first observation. You know, a caliper, a rear brake, a front brake that hits a rock on a petrol bike is more likely to stay than on this motorcycle. The second thing I would say is you need to upgrade your suspension if you still do consider want to do that. And with the addition of those wheels and tires on this bike, it adds a lot of weight, a lot of handspring weight, a lot of weight in general on the bike. So that means you have to essentially upgrade fork, springs, which I did at the back, which was great, but at the front it's air. You really have to go a lot harder, and then it becomes a lot more rough, and then it's a lot harder. In general, this bike has, in my mind, been built for light forest trails, packed dirt, mountain bike kind of trails, but smooth, not necessarily humid, wet, not necessarily bumpy. And that's where this bike shines, absolutely, hands down. So if you want to just do fire trails, single trails, mountain bike type of rides, I think this is the perfect fit, and I mean that's how the bike was built, and with that in mind. But it is not built for enduro for those two reasons that I just told you. The other thing I would suggest to consider is, if you fit a tire that big, you need to have clearance. You need to ensure the clearance between the top of the knobs here and the linkage, and that is very hard to achieve. So not only you have to modify your swing arm to push the wheel towards the back, so grind the swing arm, extend that lip here to fit the caliper, and then try to fit the wheel but that wheel can only go so far, and when it is as far as possible, it's literally, you know, 0.5 millimeter from the linkage. So that means that you have to have the exact chain link, and in my situation here with a 60T sprocket and stock at the front, I can't achieve that perfect spot. It's really just too tight. So that means you'll have either too much of a slack of a chain or a chain that is 100% rock solid. And that's essentially what I get now after my ride, and the chain being completely wet and all the grease gone now. It's rock solid. It's not great. It's not how this bike is meant to operate, and that's just going to create wear and tear on the bike, on the sprockets prematurely, potentially snap a chain. Not good. And then if you consider also that you get a lot of travel in enduro, you know, with the suspension working a lot, that chain is also working a lot, so it's actually working against you, creating tension. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. I'm not gonna make any more videos on this. This is the end. To me, that's my verdict. As much as I was excited to do that, and then ask myself, well, would I, if I was to put a battery pack, you know, a 72 volt, a 60 volt with a beefed up controller, and crank this bike to, you know, a lot more power, would that make a difference? And at first I thought, oh yeah, but then I had the day to think about it, and no, actually, because then you got to upgrade your brakes. And I mean, even if you upgrade your brakes, they're still top of the line mountain bike brakes, but they're mountain bike brakes, so they're not gonna handle the roughness of the terrain that you're riding. That's just not possible. And then of course, if you do that, it's going to put more stress on the drivetrain. Those sprockets are aluminium, you know, everything wears. And then if you add the 72 volt and anything, you end up with a you know, a not top of the line, but very good entry class petrol but enduro bike that has already all these features and capabilities. So yes, you'll get more power on this bike, but everything else is going to stress. So not only you have to upgrade all the components to handle the extra weight, but on top of that, you have to go on top of the maintenance a lot more. Because that's the other thing. Now I've only done 20 Ks enduro. I'm gonna have to strip the axle. I'm gonna have to strip the calipers, the pad. Probably they're worn or they're glazed. I'm gonna have to check my discs. I'm gonna have to check the swing arm pivot points and flex, because everything's flexed so much today. You know, I'm gonna have to check it for cracks. I can't just go on the ride for 50 k's an hour, have a crack in the swing arm, you know. So all that put together tells me that this is absolutely not the right application for this bike. It will create more hassle. It will cause you more money down the track. It is definitely more fun. Like there are places that I would have been scared on my enduro petrol before, where I was like literally I could go, but generally they were up hills, not down hills, because I have no brakes. So it just breaks all the confidence when you ride. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, consider that on an electric bike you don't have a gear, so you don't have the ability to stop yourself in the middle of a rock like you would with an enduro bike. So that happened to me a few times, where it's either on off, or you have to judge it, essentially use your throttle as your engine braking or gear, you know, brake, which I start to do now. But I've also noticed by doing that on the Talaria, you get an error 46 if you do that for too long. So you know, you're jumping, you're on the rock, you miss it or whatever, you keep it held just enough that the bike stays engaged and still, and that gives you, you know, maybe 20-30 seconds in that position maximum, and then you get an error 46, which is normal, which I think I might be wrong here, but I think it is the engine overheating, or at least, or the gearbox overheating. So that makes sense. Not good. And then the other thing is, even though you have more weight at the front with this wheel, it is still very light. I mean, that front suspension is a mountain bike design, so it is not a 48 mil diameter pure motocross fork, a lot heavier, with a lot heavier of a, I mean, the wheel is comparable, but you know, bigger hub as well, so more weight at the front. So what that means is, if you're going uphill on gnarly stuff, and you essentially have too much angle, that the bike just starts wheeling, and there is no way to keep it down unless you're really at the front of the bike, if you have the luxury to do that. But in some instances you just have to commit, and it happens that, you know, you'd basically start lifting the front. On an enduro bike or petrol bike, at least, that's a different story, because at least you've got that white to keep you at the front. So that's another thing that I thought wasn't really suited for enduro. Then the other thing is too, is for enduro, you've got to commit, meaning you just have to hit it hard sometimes. You just have to roll through. You have to throttle through the obstacles. And with a bike like this, with all the components being a lot more soft and sensitive, that is a concern, doing that over and over and over again. The bash plate is, again, if you plan to doing that, the bash plate is absolutely not adapted to this type of riding, even though the clearance right now is pretty good. So you have to upgrade the bash plate, but even with that, upgrading the bash plate, I haven't seen a proper bash plate. I mean, there is a steel bash plate that I think e-bikes sell, but still it's not, in my opinion, with the type of stuff you're doing, it's just going to destroy pretty easily. And a few times today I was thinking to myself, crap, if I'm running through this water puddle here, or if I'm hitting this rock and I drop it and the bike craps itself, what do? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like, so I mean, that you've got the same story with the petrol bike, and I've been there before, but you got to consider that as well when you're talking more serious enduro stuff. The other thing I mentioned earlier is you have to wear enduro stuff. So that means you have to wear heavy boots, you have to wear an armor, heavy knee pads and so on. So that adds a lot of weight on top of the 6 or 7 kilos that those tires and wheels add to the bike as well. So now we're talking, what, 30% of the bike total weight is actually added to the bike. And if you're not 100% battery, like I said in my previous video, at about 40-ish%, the thing becomes so sluggish that it won't carry you. You know, it will just slow down uphill, and it's not a nice experience. Again, you can correct that with a controller, but for all the reasons that I'm outlining above, I don't think it's necessary. Trimming the knobs wasn't a great experience either. I mean, you don't really want to trim anything out of the box, really. They are meant for that. I didn't have any moment today where I lost the rear because of the knobs. But I knew that already. That's the reason why I cut those knobs, is because with this type of riding, I knew that I wouldn't be using the sidewall, you know. So, and that really comes back to, I think, my ignorance at the beginning with electric bikes, which was I thought that I could fit everything that a petrol bike could do. And then I quickly realized that you actually have to appreciate the bike for what it's built for. And trying to get it outside of that comfort zone is possible. Everything is possible, but the endurance and the performance of the components are going to suffer, and the cost is going to go up anyway, because you're going to have to replace broken things or maintain them at a much higher frequency. Like, for example, the front fork from memory is, I think, 25 hours or 40 hours of full rebuild on the mountain bike. So and you have to stay on top of these things. So that adds a lot of complexity. And also, an enduro bike is something you kind of pick up and go, you know. It's a dirty bike, it's something you don't really care about. With this, you can't really do that, you know. You have to stay on top of the maintenance. So there are definitely moments I had fun today with those tires in situations where it wasn't too gnarly, too rocky, or too steep. So I wouldn't say necessarily single trails, but type of trails that were flowy and also were rutted, like with like big bumps and stuff. That was fun, and that's something I think I would have had trouble with the stock wheels for sure. So going a little smaller wheels on this and trying to get it as light as possible, maybe. But I think my plan for now is going to be change those wheels back to the stock ones, ride the back as it is, change all my gearing, etc., stop all the stress on the chain and everything, get the bike to what it was designed to do. I will also replace or try to fix my headstock bearing, which took a beating today, even though, I mean, I have a rod running through the head column that pushes on each side and try to keep things still, without, of course, pressing too much the bearing, but it doesn't matter, it's just creating play. Because that rocky environment is really, really hard on those components. So I think I had other reasons as well, but I think that'll conclude my video, guys, today. My personal experience is, no, don't do it. I think it's not worth it. And also, if you're not prepared like me to put, to drop 4 or 5 grand on a bigger battery, bigger controller, upgraded brakes, to try to get this bike to the next level, then I think the best thing to do is to go back to stock. Try to keep those milk racing wheels, because at the end of the day they have heavier spokes, which is always nice, you know. Even though you do single trails, there will always be, you know, rotten moments or bumpy moments and stuff. So I think there's still a good case on the 18, on the milk racing. Although now that I know what I know, I would actually go back to probably try a 1619, or 1619 I think. And now I think I understand why people were saying 1619. That at first I couldn't really, you know, imagine that would work for me. In my mind, coming from petrol bikes, 1821 was the way to go. But I can appreciate now where you're coming from a 1619, because smaller wheels, less weight, closer to stock once again, but probably with a better turning capability, and still better handling, because you could still fit a bigger tire, I guess. So if you can get those smaller tires with more meat on the tire, but essentially because of the diameter you gain that weight back, which means you can get a bigger tire that would be the same weight. So yeah, I can see the argument in doing that. So yeah, back to stock bike completely. Stock wheels to start with. I'll research the tires that I can fit either on the stock wheel, that are not stock, because yeah, those stock tires I think we could do better. I know the MX-33 is an option. I know there's Mitas as well, but I still don't know today if on the stock Talaria you can fit an MX-33 70, having the 70-100, or even better, fitting a 90 by 100 or 100 by 100 of a specific brand that wouldn't touch the chain. So if you guys know, I would really like you to put a comment on the page. And yeah, that's going to be the end of my posting for the Talaria, at least on those Enduro stuff. I might do some more if we end up doing some events here in Australia, or, you know, gather a few, or do something special that I think you guys could benefit from. And other than that, have a good day.